An ordinary day. You're on yet another business trip abroad, soaring high above the clouds. A cup of coffee in your hand, Manifest playing through your headphones. You're relaxed. Everything feels perfect. Then, suddenly, that familiar hum is replaced by a deafening explosion. The cabin pressure drops instantly. Oxygen masks fall from above and slam into your face as the aircraft begins an uncontrollable descent. Suitcases flying through the cabin. And then, a terrifying silence. Congratulations. When you open your eyes, you're greeted by the sting of salt water on your face and the scorching heat of the sun overhead. Around you lie pieces of the wreckage, an endless ocean stretching to the horizon, and behind you stands a dense, untouched jungle. You're the only survivor. At least, for now. Yep, the impossible has happened. The odds were 1 in 11 million. And, somehow, you beat them. Statistically speaking, the chance of a commercial aircraft being involved in a fatal accident is roughly 1 in 11 million. Honestly, that's not even the rarest thing that could happen to you. The chance of being attacked by a shark is around 1 in 3.7 million. The chance of being struck by lightning within a year is roughly 1 in 1.2 million. The chance of dying after falling out of bed is about 1 in 2 million. But the chance of dying in a road accident? That's around 1 in 103. In other words, 1 out of every 103 people will sadly lose their life in a traffic accident. In fact, during a normal flight, you're far more likely to die on the drive to the airport than in the plane itself. But none of that matters anymore. What's done is done. Now your only goal is survival. Because unless a flight is illegal or deliberately hidden, every aircraft is tracked. And if contact with that aircraft is lost, search and rescue operations begin from the last known coordinates. So, you need to stay alive. You need to stay strong until they find you. Because what you do next depends entirely on where you've crashed. If you land in a desert, your greatest enemy is dehydration. You should avoid moving during the day, stay in the shade whenever possible, and only travel at night. Your first priority is finding water. If you crash somewhere near the poles, or on a cold, snow-covered wasteland, your greatest enemy becomes the cold itself. Your first task is building shelter and preserving body heat. Finding water isn't the problem there. You melt snow. Simple as that. And by the way, something very similar actually happened. The year was 1972. An aircraft carrying a Uruguayan rugby team crashed into the freezing peaks of the Andes Mountains. They didn't have a pleasant experience. Rescue teams couldn't find them, and eventually the search was called off. They were stranded for 72 days in temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius, trapped in a frozen white hell with no food and no hope. At first, they survived by sharing the chocolate and biscuits they recovered from the wreckage. But as the weeks passed, their supplies ran out. They learned through a radio that the rescue operation had been abandoned. They became so desperate that they even chewed on pieces of leather from their suitcases. Eventually, they had no choice left. To survive, they resorted to cannibalism. They ate the frozen bodies of their friends who had already died. After 72 days, 2 of the survivors managed to cross the mountains on foot and call for help. And out of everyone on that aircraft, only 16 people survived. And honestly, crashing in the polar regions, or anywhere extremely cold, is one of the worst survival scenarios imaginable. In a desert, you might burn around 3,500 to 4,500 calories a day. But in freezing conditions, your body can require between 5,000 and 7,000 calories every single day just to stay warm. Which means you need to find even more food. The polar regions are basically white deserts. No soil. No plants. No plants means no herbivores. And no herbivores means no predators. There's nothing there except ice, rock, and endless wind. But if you happen to crash on a tropical island, like the one you're standing on right now, your chances of survival become much, much better. On a tropical island, your body typically burns between 2,500 and 3,500 calories a day. That's because the climate is much closer to your body's natural temperature. You don't need to burn thousands of extra calories just to keep yourself warm or cool yourself down. Most of your energy will be spent building shelter, gathering firewood, and walking across the beach. Yes, the humidity can be exhausting, but unlike the freezing cold of the polar regions, it won't drain your energy within minutes. A tropical island presents a different set of challenges. Dense jungle, relentless humidity, insects, parasites, contaminated water, and predators, which means your priorities change. Before worrying about food, you need 2 things: shelter and safe drinking water. Your very first objective is to produce clean water. The first few hours after the crash pass in a blur. You're still in shock. But once you begin to think clearly, the first thing you should do is wash the salt off your skin. The solution is surprisingly simple. Sand. Rub sand over your body to remove the salt left behind by the seawater. Before long, the tropical sun reaches its highest point, and that's when your greatest enemy appears. Dehydration. You're surrounded by water, yet not a single drop of it is safe to drink. Seawater forces your kidneys to work beyond their limits and can kill you within a matter of hours. If you want to survive, you'll have to make nature work in your favor. But before producing water, search the aircraft wreckage. Look for anything that could help you survive. Sealed food, canned supplies, bottled water, anything edible that's still protected. If you find fresh food or fruit that's already been exposed, eat it within the next few days before it spoils. Let's say you're lucky. You recover a small amount of food and water. That will keep you going for a while. But you have no idea how long you'll be stranded. Sooner or later, you'll need a permanent source of fresh water. If there are coconut trees nearby, you're incredibly fortunate. A coconut isn't just food. It's a natural container, a source of drinking water, and an excellent source of energy. In fact, coconuts have played an important role throughout history. During the Second World War, particularly in parts of the Pacific, there were rare occasions when coconut water was used in emergency medical situations because conventional medical supplies were unavailable. But let's assume you're not that lucky. You search the island, and you find very few coconuts. That means you'll need to produce your own drinking water. Fortunately, you have one enormous advantage: an endless sandy beach. But before stepping out into the open sun, cover as much of your body as possible. Use spare clothing from the wreckage. Wrap yourself in fabric. Or use large leaves if that's all you have. Otherwise, severe sunburn will make your first day far more difficult than it needs to be. If you do manage to find coconuts, there's another useful trick. Crush the coconut flesh with a stone and leave it to dry. As the moisture evaporates, natural coconut oil remains behind. Applying it to your skin can help soothe sunburn and reduce irritation. Now, it's finally time to produce fresh water. And thankfully, it's not as difficult as you might think. Dig a hole in the sand around 50 to 60 centimeters deep. Place a container at the bottom. A metal cup. A plastic container. Anything capable of collecting water. If you have waterproof plastic from the aircraft, stretch it tightly across the hole. The waterproof fabric from a life jacket can work as well. If none of those are available, a large palm leaf is better than nothing. Next, fill the area around the container with fresh green leaves collected from the jungle. Then, seal the top tightly with the plastic sheet, making sure the edges are covered with sand so no air can escape. Finally, place a small stone in the center of the plastic sheet, directly above the container. As the sun heats the sand and the leaves, water begins to evaporate. The vapor rises and condenses on the underside of the plastic. Gravity does the rest. Drop by drop, fresh water collects inside your container. Congratulations. You've just produced clean drinking water, using nothing more than sunlight, seawater, and a little patience. But perhaps you don't want to wait that long. In that case, you can head into the jungle in search of a natural freshwater source. Because where healthy forests grow, fresh water usually isn't far away. But finding fresh water doesn't mean you should drink it straight away. Just because it looks clean doesn't mean it's safe. It could be filled with parasites, bacteria, and harmful microorganisms. At best, you'll spend the next few days suffering from severe diarrhea. At worst, it could cost you your life. That's why your next priority is making the water safe to drink. And for that, you'll need fire. Not just to purify water, but to cook food. Keep yourself warm during the night. Scare away predators. And create smoke that rescue aircraft can spot from miles away. If you don't have a lighter or matches, you'll have to make fire yourself. Find a sturdy piece of hardwood and carve it into a bow. Tie a cord between the two ends. Then, wrap the cord around a straight, dry stick and place it on a softer piece of wood. Move the bow back and forth as quickly as you can. The friction will slowly create heat. The heat will create an ember. And with dry grass, bark, and small twigs, that tiny ember will eventually become a fire. Congratulations. You now have one of the most valuable survival tools on the island. Now it's time to build a simple water filter. Take a plastic bottle from the wreckage. Or, if you're lucky enough to find one, a thick piece of bamboo. Cut the bottom off the bottle. Place a clean piece of cloth at the very bottom. On top of that, add crushed charcoal from your fire. Then pour in a layer of fine sand. And finally, a layer of small pebbles. As the water passes through each layer, much of the dirt and many harmful particles will be trapped. Even so, If possible, always boil the water before drinking it. It's still the safest option. Now, you've solved two of your biggest problems: fire and water, which leaves one final priority before nightfall: shelter. Because once the sun goes down, the island reveals its true nature. The temperature drops, the wind becomes stronger, and unfamiliar sounds begin echoing from deep inside the jungle. Sleeping out in the open on the beach is a terrible idea. The tide could drag you into the sea. Strong winds could leave you freezing, and you'll have no protection at all. Instead, gather branches, leaves, and anything else you can find to build a small shelter. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to protect you from the wind and the rain. But above all, never sleep directly on the ground. The earth will absorb your body heat much faster than you might expect. By morning, you'll have lost valuable energy. So build yourself a raised bed using branches and leaves. The further you are from the ground, the better. Congratulations. You've survived your first day. Now all you have to do is make it to sunrise. You've survived your first day, but surviving one night doesn't mean you're safe. Tomorrow, the real challenge begins. You'll learn how to protect yourself from mosquitoes, parasites, and dangerous wildlife. You'll discover which plants are safe to eat and which ones could kill you. You'll start hunting for protein along the shoreline. And after weeks of isolation, you'll face an even greater battle. Not against the island, but against your own mind. See you in part 2.